Welcome to the Boring AI Show, the podcast for people who want to understand AI beyond the headlines. We talk about the useful, messy, funny, and very human side of bringing artificial intelligence into the real world. Now, here are your hosts, Tim and Tally.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Boring AI Show. I think today's going to be a really fun episode. As usual, I'm joined here by co-host Tim Culp.
Hello.
Hello, Tim. And our special guest today is Brent Paugh. He's actually here as our data guru. He is our business intelligence manager at Mind Over Machines, specializing in all things data and BI.
Hello. Thanks, Tim and Tally, for inviting me. Excited to be here.
We're excited to jump in. I was actually, right before this recording started, I was chatting here with our audio engineer, Nicholas, about how so many people, it seems like whenever we jump into AI projects, the conversation seems to often find its way back to data and, how to classify data, what is structured versus unstructured data, and just the importance of data when it comes to AI solutions. So I think this is going to be a really pertinent topic for a lot of folks out there. So I'm really excited to have this discussion today. All right, everyone. So let's jump into our AI in the news segment. Tim, let's have you kick off, and I'm curious to hear what, I know there's always so much going on, but what relevant news article you wanted to discuss today.
Yeah, so it is a oldie, but it just resurfaced in. So every day I have AI agents going and collecting up AI related news for me, and this particular one was an AI for Good panel, which AI for Good is a great organization that is very focused on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And this one was about inclusive mental health care and talks about AI and its role in mental health care around like inclusivity and making sure you have the right people involved at the right time, as well as the right populations involved. So this was a really interesting panel discussion. And they talked through it. There's a video with it, and we'll share the article here. It was actually from the 2025 AI for Good Global Summit. I think the Global Summit's coming up in July, if I remember correctly. It's in Geneva. I keep wanting to go, but it just doesn't work out for me. Can't get a trip out to Geneva going here. So, but what's really great here is, and again, this is talking about mental health, but for anybody in any business where you think about where the humans, what their role is, what's, the AI's role, how do you make sure everybody has the right role at the right moment so that you don't have conflict and issues. So I would encourage everybody to check this out. It's a pretty good read and a pretty easy content to consume. So good stuff.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, we got to get you out there, I think, 1 year. I know that's been top of mind for you.
Yeah, I like they have this whole artist community thing at the AI for Good
cool.
conferences that like they have the DJs and visual artists and the virtual reality painters. It's pretty cool stuff. Like, and but I guess like I as Mind Over Machines, I'd go and have to like be businessy, but I want to go hang out with the artists. So
very cool. I love that. Awesome. Well, the article I was looking at, actually, it came out earlier this month, but it was around Mayo Clinic's developed an AI solution that can detect pancreatic cancer up to 3 years earlier using image recognition, which is huge because pancreatic cancer has an extremely high unfortunately death rate, and it to be able to identify it earlier can quite literally be life or death. So this was just really relevant for me. I have actually a good friend who's unfortunately going through some cancer treatment, and she has been frustrated because it can be hard to advocate for yourself in the healthcare system and obviously trusting doctors, but we're all also only human, and that's also a lot of pressure to put on a single doctor, and things could get missed. And so again, not having AIs replace doctors and being the sole diagnoser, but at least highlighting things for the doctor to then review and determine if that is something to take seriously or not. And to be that kind of backup second set of eyes. I think that was just a really, I don't know, from my perspective, a really positive use case of leveraging mass amounts of data and different CT scans to detect, things like cancer earlier to help ideally save lives. So
yeah, no, that's really interesting. So did they talk at all in the article about just curious, I've read a lot of studies about how AI in collaboration with the human doctors actually has much higher accuracy and better outcomes than the AI alone or the human alone. Did they hit anything in that?
They really just compared the human alone versus the AI. So essentially what they did was the system called the radiomix-based early detection model, so REDMOD, identified 73% of pre-diagnostic cancer, so about 16 months before their initial diagnosis. It was a lot of patients who came in earlier with certain symptoms. They got this scan. The original diagnosis from the human doctor was nothing there's nothing showing up in your chart. And then they came back later, oh, there is something on your chart now. And so they used these earlier imaging, and they did a series of, basically image recognition tests and training on this model. And it was, it was able to identify 73% of those basically missed scans,
Wow.
which is pretty wild. So again, we can imagine this was just the study, but to your point, Tim, in practice, having this be that second set of eyes in combination with the actual doctors, I think would be really, I'd be curious to see what the stats on that would be moving forward.
Interesting. And again, going back to, we all know, like in AI in the lab, there's and in the product marketing slicks, there's
Right.
all kinds of cool stuff that it can do. And when it hits reality, I think that's where we see the emergence of like the really cool stuff when the humans and the AI start working together to smash their brains together and see, what they can come up with, as long as it's not trusted blindly. Machine bias at work.
So it's the human in the loop process engineering piece there of how do we actually apply some of this data and use cases to reality, and how does that, what does that look like is what I'm hearing. Very cool. Awesome. Well, let's jump into our discussion for today. And on that note, I think it is interesting. I'm curious. This has come up actually twice now in conversations last week, both with clients and just internally. And I'm curious, Brent and Tim, what your thoughts are on the idea of like clean data. How do we define what clean data is? And then we can kind of jump into the importance of how that data can be beneficial for AI solutions, like that news example of, having all those CT scans that can be really beneficial to maybe even train AI models. But let's start with the basics of just how do we define clean data, or what are your thoughts on what clean data really is?
Brent, take it away, man, because you have a lot more valuable stuff to say about this than I do.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, clean data is interesting. I mean, the first thing it's like comes to my mind is, does AI know what clean and not clean data is? And I think off the bat, like you have to take a step back and ask yourself, I don't think AI does. Like AI, you can ask it for like a given data type or a given type of terminology, but at the end of the day, it really aligns to the problem that you're solving. You need to be able to sync with AI to be able to describe what is clean and what is not clean. For example, it can probably handle certain fields, or it has. I've seen it do that before, where it's like, hey, it's a true false field. Is it clean or not? Of course. But Tally, to your point, like that article is very interesting. It's like, what happens if someone was just, having a fun time at the CT scanner and was taking stuff of pictures of things that had nothing to do with what was going on. And it just makes the assumption that, oh, this is all clean data. Well, then the results are going to be very skewed from what reality should be. So that's some of my initial thoughts there.
Yeah, I would add to that. Does the human know what clean data means? Right. And yeah, I know, Brent, you and I have encountered this before. Like the example that we go to a lot is when we talk to people and are like, oh, it's a customer. And you talk to one team and they have a totally different definition of a customer from another team. That they're like, well, no, this event in the life cycle makes them a customer. And somebody else might be like, no, the moment they show up, they're a customer. And so it's interesting and challenging to get people to come together and say, we agree on the following definitions of clean, in this, or what is a customer or that case, or what
Sure.
is an event. And,
Yeah,
and navigating that human collaboration, man, that can be very challenging.
Yeah, and to that point, Tim, like I've seen some folks who are just like, well, I don't want to navigate that. It's psychologically taxing. I'll just have AI define what the customer is, and here's a definition of a customer based on what it knows. And it's like, well, let's roll with that. And I'm like, well, that doesn't necessarily align back to the business. And so I guess the point being is sometimes you have to slow down and understand and align across across your business or across your problem, and making sure that you're speaking the same language first before you bring in AI. Sometimes I use AI as like the summer intern. Like you can't just bring in the summer intern and be like, hey, define a customer, because they're just going to define it from a non-business value. It doesn't have the full context. They haven't worked there long enough. They haven't had the experience.
yeah, I love that. And actually, an example we use sometimes in our upskilling courses is, so with this news article, obviously we were talking about image recognition, so training the model on different images. And so the example we'll use in our course is, maybe using apples to train the data set on. But if you only use red apples and then you give the AI solution a green apple, is it going to know that too is an apple, or think that's a different fruit because it's a different color and it hasn't actually been trained on that? And then you bring up the question of, well, what about a MacBook, an Apple computer? Is that technically an apple? So really defining, when we think about language and terms, are we all really speaking the same language? And I know for us, a helpful, starting point is talking about the difference between structured versus unstructured data, and how AI really, we found does better with structured data. So making sure, it's data that is information that's organized in a predefined, database or predefined spreadsheet or schema. So, that data is organized by, like you just said, Brent, true or false, for example. Or, this row is the names of the various locations of different facilities, or, what. So all of that data is basically tagged in a sense, or structured.
Yeah. To lean into that a little bit, Tally, like my mind goes to is like in the human world, right? Psychologically, we want to be lazy. And so it's like, in a perfect world, I'd love to be able to just point AI to a database and be like, hey, just, tell me the net revenue for my business, type of thing. And that net revenue could be in 10 different places in that database and could be defined different ways. Some of it could be old versions from a different source system. And so you don't necessarily it doesn't have the context just from that blanketly like lazy scenario of just like hook it up to the database and go.
Right.
In the inverse, one thing I've done personally, which I realized, I was like, it's been interesting to me how it's been so effective, and now I understand why, is baseball statistics. I've been taking, I coached my son's 10U team, and there's this awesome app online called Game Changer. So you don't keep your scores in a playbook anymore. Like usually in baseball, every time someone moved a base, you'd have to pencil mark where their bases was and who hit, who had an RBI, what was their pitching, pitching average, etc. Well, this Game Changer app gives you a slew of statistics per player, per game or per season, and I have been exporting that out of Game Changer and putting that into AI and acting as a baseball analyst and asking myself like, hey, if I change the lineup around, what would be the best scenario to get people on base? Well, there's the on base percentage statistic already in Game Changer per person. And where I'm going with that is that's already defined like on base percentage. And on base percentage is a very common term that's used across all of baseball. And the field itself is formatted as a percentage or a decimal point. And it's very, I say clean, it is, every row of the 13 boys on the baseball team has a statistic and it's within nominal range. And it comes back to me and says, hey, you know what, for your league that you're in for 10U, on base, he says, I agree with you, on base percentage is important. And based on that, this is how I would end up ranking them. And I review and I'm like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Or, hey, I didn't think about this situation because it had other statistics that Game Changer dumped out. It was like 25 different baseball statistics. Some of them I'm still learning about. But anyways, I digress with that, tallying, Tim, because it just goes back to the cleanness to be able to answer an effective question. It takes some human effort to create alignment in your business and concurrency that people understand when someone says a given term or a given metric that you can align on it and move forward with it.
Yeah. And I think that's a great illustration, the baseball illustration, because it also emphasizes like you have to have people that know what they're doing. Because the whole time as you were going through that, Brent, I'm like, I don't know any of this stuff. I'm like, yay, baseball. Like there's a ball and there's a bat and people wear gloves. And that's about my extent of knowledge of baseball. And so, like people for me to do, yay, sports ball. But for me to go, and we see this where people are like, well, AI will know what I mean and what it'll know the right answers to the things. No, like if you don't fundamentally understand the work that you're trying to get the AI tool to do, be careful. Because like if Brent, if you came to me and were like, Tim, can you be our baseball statistics analyst? And I'm like, yeah, sure, ChatGPT can do it. I got this. I don't even know the right questions and the right language to be talking to the system in.
That's a good point. Yeah, because it is like in my example, it's a difference between the major leagues, like major leagues, like the Orioles and the Pirates, versus my 10U league is totally different. Like there's a lot of walks, there's a lot of inconsistencies, and so to leverage AI, like it can give you a hallucination of like, here's how it's set up, but if you don't give it, like you said, Tim, like the context of like, playing in a different type of league and age group makes a difference, then it's going to hallucinate but also hallucinate and psychologically give you confidence. Like this is the best thing.
And what you said, 10U, I didn't even know that was a thing. I was thinking Tenmu or Timu, and I was like, so that's even that foundational stuff, like super important.
And it's interesting. My next question here was going to be, why is like clean or structured data so important when it comes to AI? And I think you guys just highlighted one, to get the output that you're actually seeking. If we're basically speaking different languages or we have different definitions for, your earlier example, Tim, like what a client is, how is AI going to know that unless it's been trained appropriately? And in order to be trained appropriately, the humans need to make those, definitions in the data in the first place. But also, Tim, to your point, not only to get the best output, but also to have a human in the loop who's an expert to be able to verify if that output is actually the best output you're seeking, to even know the criteria to understand that output in the first place. And then I would say the third piece to it, I'm curious, if you guys have any other points to why data is so critical when it comes to AI. But in my perspective, also, data security and classifying data as, is data restricted or sensitive, and it might be different for different companies and different folks. And obviously that is important. I mean, even with the example of, the news article I mentioned earlier with using CT scans for image recognition. I mean, if they start doing that earlier on, and then maybe that data gets released to insurance companies, does that create an increase in insurance costs, for example. Are there basically implications with data being used, whether it's unconsensually or putting unclassified data out there as well? And so really making sure not only your data is structured, but it's also classified appropriately based on the sensitivity of the data, I think is important from my perspective. But I'm curious, if you guys have any thoughts on that, or thoughts on, just the importance of data as it, relates to AI.
Yeah, lots of thoughts on that. So, a few pieces. Context is king, especially in the world of generative AI. Like if you're into like machine learning, statistical AI, obviously you need to have the right, dimensions with the right data, all that good stuff. And it's super important for, because it's math, like you're calculating out the right answer, you need to make sure you have the right data and the right attributes going to that data to say what matters for the calculation. But context wise, like going back to our apples discussion, if I walk into an Apple store and I say, hey, my apple's broken, if I just say it like that, did I walk into an Apple computer store or did I walk into a store that sells apples? And so that just having that data around like context, what are we talking about? Because it's going to matter. I walk into a farmer's market and say my apple's broken. They're going to say, just go get another apple. Like they're not going to tell me that at the Apple store. Like just go pick one off the shelf. You're fine. Just get a new one. That'd
Let
be
me know
awesome.
which Apple store that is, if that's the case.
Yeah, that'd be awesome if that was the case. So the other aspect too, like the data classification, especially when using a third-party tool, like whether it's Copilot or ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or whatever, Perplexity, your AI tool of choice. Like as an organization, you're going to have certain data classifications that data shouldn't go in to those tools. So I'm thinking about some of the clients that we're working with, they allow Copilot to be used with certain data and have a hard, like you cannot use ChatGPT for this other data, or certain features within those tools. Like for instance, you can use Copilot, but not with the web grounding with this type of data. You can't use the web connectors. So that data classification, super, super important, especially when it comes to third-party apps. Brent, what's your thoughts on data and from a security perspective? I'm thinking like HIPAA data, personally identifiable, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I like analogies. I mean, one thing in my mind goes back to that summer intern example. Like, treat AI as a summer intern, like it as a resource from perspective. Like that doesn't mean you just give the summer intern the keys to the IT closet and all the security file cabinets and all that stuff. No, you end up if the summer intern has a specific project or task that needs that specific information, and that information has a policy with IT or based on the governance policies of your company, then you procure that access to that resource, whether it's the summer intern or AI, to do that related task. It's like, well, if I have AI and I just deploy it and let it connect to everything in SharePoint, it'll all be good. It's just within AI, it'll be secure within AI. And I'm like, that would be a very quick, risky situation you need to be careful of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially unfettered access with connectors. So Claude Cowork, is a great example of this, where it can do crazy powerful stuff, and delete things that you say it can, and remove folders and wipe out, wipe things out when you're like, yeah, it's fine. Because I didn't know what that Python, it was asking me if it could run this Python script, and I don't know what that Python script did. And I just said, okay. And oh, geez, oops. So yeah.
I mean, another thought, Tim, too, is like, what could you use AI for? Is I've had projects in the past where you're like, well, like identification, like you have to, you make a consolidated identifier, across different source systems, and you want to make sure that Joe is Joe and create this unique member ID. And so as a developer or as an architect, you're like, man, I'd really like to see what they end up, what situations they have, or mirror that to run testing and to do development. And one thing I've enjoyed is creating that context. I'll work with the customer up front and be like, hey, what is the data types? What are examples that you're seeing? So I don't actually get their PHI or their PII data. Instead, I understand, hey, this is what they see on the other side of the fence. I'm going to create really a sample data set that I can work with, and I can share back to the client and be like, hey, this is a sample data set that I'm working with. Or back to Tally, to your point, here's example CT scans that we created. Is this resonating with what you would expect to be seen? And then you can use that leverage to evolve and refine, with also at the same time protecting the customers or your demographics, private information.
I love that example of using faux data sets and data sets just to experiment versus actual data that could put.
Yeah, it's so easy today to do that. I mean, 15, 20 years ago, to create a sample data set, you end up having to open up like C# and use a bunch of random function generators and so forth. And what's cool is with AI too, you can see like off by default, it in your mind, you don't give it enough context, and it creates a sample set of data. I'm like, that's not the direction of the sample I wanted it to go. Like, I need to diversify this over here to help address these other use cases. So it's been a great tool in the toolbox to generate data sets like that with very low resistance.
Yeah, but again, highlighting, but you could do that by hand. Like you have those skill sets, you have those capabilities that, that Brent could build this, but you're using AI to accelerate the build of that because you know what to look for, what's problematic. You know what I mean? So it's again, I'm just highlighting the, don't blindly people just be like, well, AI can do it, so it must be right. Like, synthetic data set. Yeah. Just, it's the first result that came on Google. I'm sure it's the best result.
Right.
It's so, that whole synthetic data set is a perfect setup, as you were talking about, Brent, because years ago, to create a synthetic data set was brutal, so much so that it was just pretty much not worth the effort, depending on the type of project. Now, and I don't know if you ever use the Redgate tools, the SQL data generator.
Yep.
Super, super powerful tools. And now it's kind of like, well, if I just give the schema to, my system, I can generate out data from there. And again, think about data classifications. Think about, everybody remember the whole issue with Samsung where some of the developers exposed the code to an AI model and the model was able to train on it. And the question became, did they lose their legal protections on that code because they gave it up willingly? So just make sure you're thinking through, is whatever you're putting into the system, data classification, is it okay to share? And do you have the right licenses to protect your data in the AI tool of choice?
Yeah. What are the implications of that?
Right.
I guess, that brings us to the next question too. Of, I think right now, because AI, especially chatbots, are so buzzy, I think that's a lot of people's first instinct is like, okay, I want an answer to XYZ. Let me, ask a chatbot. And I guess, Brent, a question I have for you is, especially, for the audience listening, what are times you would recommend using a chatbot versus using a BI semantic model, for example? I think a lot of people are trying to get business intelligence data just simply using a chatbot. And I don't know, again, based on the data it has access to, if that's always, and how the tool actually functions, if that's always the best solution, when in some cases they might actually just need a business intelligence model to help them get the answers they're looking for.
Yeah, sure. Good question, Tally. Where my mind goes to is thinking about back to your example a little bit, maybe more vividly, is like a dashboard, right? You have a BI dashboard today. That dashboard has been in production for 6 months, a year, 2 years, and it had a project behind it. There was alignment, and there was metrics that came to be. Some of it could be like gross revenue or item inventory. Just some metrics around that. And what happens is some things that I have found is adoption of those dashboards. Like some executives or directors, even managers, they're not dashboards that they need to go to every day. Maybe they need to go out once a month or once a quarter, and they have to, here it is on Friday, and they need to go through their checklist and like, oh, I got to go out to that dashboard. Well, sometimes that dashboard isn't formatted the way they wanted, and or they're familiar to them. Maybe it was made for another department, but they're also using it, and so they get frustrated because they have to go through and again understand how to navigate to get that number, adjust so many filters, and so where AI can come in is really attaching to the semantic layer that the dashboard was built off of. So for those who don't know a semantic layer, think of it as humans took data to define a schema to answer business related questions. And so that schema, you can put different visualization tools against it. So relationships exist between like sales and inventory, and that's been defined and well understood. And so, you can connect AI to the semantic layer to ask a question that will tie back to the BI dashboard. So that's really good, and that's a thumbs up. That's something that we've seen today, with again, managerial and up, where they want to go in and ask a question, but they don't, again, want to have to relearn how to access it. They can go and ask, what is the inventory? What is the revenue? Just through like a somewhat natural language processing. I think where you end up as shortcomings is if you're trying to ask that same metric of like, hey, what is the net revenue without the semantic model? AI is just going to pick randomly where it finds anything related to net revenue and report it back. Or it might find that and you say like, hey, I want to look at it by region. And if it has no context of what region is, it's going to find an article that's 10 years old sitting on your SharePoint and be like, well, so-and-so created a region here. I'm just going to make it look like I know what region looks like. And so it creates a lot of frustration there. It creates a lot of angst. And it's like, well, AI isn't doing what it's supposed to do. And I'm like, well, AI could be powerful in that light if, again, if it comes in the context of what you're trying to do. So, Tim, you want to add anything to that?
I do. Sorry, I was like, yep. Adding in because I was thinking about a recent example where we were using Copilot internally to pull some slides together, and it was pulling slides from old versions of presentations. And again, well, how did it know it was an old version? Well, it didn't respect the, V2, V3, V3_final. And again, we know what that means, but we also know that's terrible practice and we shouldn't be doing that. And that it doesn't help, our AI systems. And so as we have like all these drafts floating around, how does Copilot, in this case, know which one is the official message? And so that getting to the semantic data model, that's super important because it gives like, this is the place, the source of truth. Look here to get your answer, not wherever you find whatever you think might match.
Yeah. Leaning into that, Tim, part as you say that, it's like a part of it's like, semantic data model. I have to go build that. It's like, it feels like I'd rather have a tooth pulled sometimes. But it's super important. Like, how are you going to scale your business without having something like that? And having that knowledge center, having that informational library and relationships of how your business runs and operates and how you monitor the health of it. And there's opportunities that you don't have to start big and monolithic. It was always the big BI project back in the day. You can have AI, if you're just trying to look at sales based on region, just start there.
Mhm.
and you can agile your way through it and build that semantic model along the way. It doesn't have to be, for those who are just starting out, you're like, well, I don't want to start a 12-month project. And I don't think you have to, but yeah, I know you don't have to. And there's opportunities that you can have that. You can go to AI and ask those questions with a little bit of alignment and creation of a semantic layer in the back end, and also allows some governance and transparency for the company as well.
Yeah.
I love that. And what I'm also hearing too is not only thinking about, cleaning your data to make sure your humans know and can access data, but also thinking about how these tools are going to be digesting data. I think recently, Tim, you had a great call out of, I think I sent you an email report on some stats. And I had, various headings, but the headings weren't like official, Outlook wouldn't have recognized those as headings. They were just larger text, essentially. And you
Mhm.
asked to make sure those are headings, because if it was being digested by AI, they can, AI will use those different, title, subtitle, heading, formatted function to digest the data. So it would be more digestible for AI rather than just the visual cues for the human. And so I like that call out of making sure we're thinking about, creating data that's going to be appropriately used by these various tools. I think is an important call
Yeah.
out as well.
Yeah, always being mindful of like who's the audience for the communication, and recognizing nowadays you want your human to understand what you're communicating, but there's a good chance that they have an AI sidekick who also will need to be able to parse through, you know, that which is shared and sent. So um, it's a different world. So
Yeah. One thing I'd like to lean back to, Tally, is one thing we haven't hit a ton with in regards to data and AI is around like, but we hit it in that article around the CI CAT scans is like predictive analytics, machine
Mhm.
learning type of thing. Is going back to having clean data, being whether it's a semantic layer or whatever you're training and providing context. It's back in that article is like once you have that, it's not just telling you what like hey, this CT scan is cancerous, this CT scan is not cancerous. I think the idea of the article was also saying, hey, I can tell whether or not someone is trending to be cancerous or not, based on the volume of
Right. Statistical
information that we
likelihood.
have. And so
Right.
it's once you have that strong baseline, which again takes some investment, you can have AI lean into machine learning and give you a stronger answer. Like you can have it back on the revenue side or inventory side. You can have it lean into thinking your small and medium companies. You're trying to predict inventory that you need to order, or what sales could be forecasting out. Like once you have that defined, it can give you a lot more stronger results to review coming back, and it can give you that service. And I think some people are so focused on AI, just give me the answer to the question, that they sometimes lose focus on there is more behind the covers too, that you can extend past like BI dashboards using that same semantic layer.
I love that. Yeah, not thinking of AI as just a Google answer machine. Yeah, but
Right.
there's so many other capabilities that AI really has, especially if you have the data, with it that it can leverage.
And
Awesome.
that's where value really starts coming in. Like it's not just, well, it can give me answers. Like, well, it can help you think, it can help you strategize, it can help you do all this other stuff. So, but you gotta have your context right, you gotta have your data right,
Yep.
all that good stuff. So
Awesome.
um Allie, are we gonna move into
Yeah,
wins
no,
here,
I was just
or
going to ask if there's anything else to add at this point before we jump into AI use cases. Anything you feel like we missed, or to summarize? What I heard, I just want to be clear, is data is important, and also an expert who understands that data deeply is important when thinking about data as it relates to AI. The human in the loop, not only to help build and use a solution, but also to verify if those outputs are in fact accurate. You really do need somebody who gets and understands the data. Is the main takeaway I heard. But please let me know, Brent or Tim, if there's any other main takeaway that I missed.
no, I think that's on point. Like, you gotta have your humans, you gotta have capable humans. It's a human world. So AI can help out, but your humans, that's where your value is.
Yeah. And you got to have the checkpoints along the way. Like you
Yep.
can't go too far, or there's going to be enough. I'm calling back to hallucinations that you think you're on the right path, but you aren't. Yeah. So just be cautious about that. It is a powerful tool, but you also have to learn how to use it.
Absolutely.
With great power comes great responsibility,
Yes. There.
right?
Did you just create that
So,
quote, Tim?
Right.
I quote Tim Cough now. So,
Awesome. All right. Well, on that note, let's go to AI use cases. Tim, how are you using AI lately that the audience might be interested in?
so I actually had some fun this morning with Claude's Opus 4.8 using the new swarm mode. I don't know if new is right, but using the new swarm feature where you can have orchestration and coordination. I think they call it dynamic workflows, but it's agent swarm, where you can spin up lots of different agents to do a single task and then report back what you're doing. So this morning, I keep a knowledge graph of all things human AI pathways related. It is like my second brain relating to human AI pathways. And this morning, I had a major update to it. So working through it, and it ran for, I think it was like an hour and a half, roughly, that it ran for this update. It was 80 plus agents, all coordinated, doing this stuff, and lots and lots and lots of tokens. And so it was interesting to see. Very useful for large tasks like what I was trying to do.
Mhm.
I don't love there was very much like well, if I'm just going to figure out what to do, I'm going to go from here and do it. And of course, there was like hey, I want to run this command. Is that okay? I want to run this command. Is that okay? There was all those checkpoints, but I don't really want 80 plus agents. Like I'd rather not have all that happening. Let's minimize it a little bit. And so it was really interesting to experiment with this, spinning up an entire workforce to do these updates, which again, historically, I wouldn't have done this, or I would have had interns like go read all this and update this accordingly. But this was pretty useful. Now the intern role is, can you make sure this is accurate? Here's all this information.
Yeah.
So
Tim,
pretty
why?
powerful stuff.
Yeah, Tim, why the 80? Why, just naively, why can't one AI agent just, magically do that thing for you?
Well, so it is actually a bunch of different tasks divvied up to specialist agents. So in this particular case, there was like one agent who was a content creation agent for a specific topic in human AI pathways. And then there was another agent that was the verification agent to go and check that the creation agent actually created accurate to the source material. And then there was another agent that was the auditing agent to check, did we cover everything I said to cover? So like when you break it down, per piece of content we were looking at, as well as it divvied up the work, there were multiple agents to do the work, check the work, verify the work, all that good stuff.
Perfect. Thanks. That's great. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. But I would have liked control over that. But maybe I'm now asked, maybe I'm just being greedy here of like, wow, I could do all this agent stuff and I want more. Give me more.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, my use case actually builds on last week. So I know last week I mentioned, actually I brought up a second use case of summarization, but and using AI for visual asset creation, like things like, marketing, quick visuals, things like that. I touched briefly last week on using AI for slide generation, but I wanted to bring it up again today and talk about a couple different additional uses, just because this keeps coming up both internally and within my personal world of, how do we use AI to create really good PowerPoint decks or slide decks. And so I just wanted to highlight, I've been playing around a little bit with there's actually a PowerPoint agent in Copilot, which has been really interesting to just explore basically text to image generation. So just outlining what exactly you're looking for in the PowerPoint, maybe uploading, some notes or a transcript or any sort of documentation that might be relevant to help build out a PowerPoint deck. There's also a really great slide feature in Notebook LM. So again, if your organization uses Gemini and different Google products, that's a really cool feature and really powerful. And I actually was playing around with it at the end of last week and this week, and it's really cool to see some of the visuals, and honestly, some of the slides I thought could even be used as infographics or marketing content, because there was on some of the slides quite a bit of meat, depending on how you're trying to use a deck. And then I think we mentioned last week, but just to call this out again, using in Miro, there's the AI agent Sidekick to develop various slides. And again, maybe you could develop a slide in Miro and pull it over to PowerPoint, or, mess around with Notebook LM to see what you can, so kind of using these tools concurrently as well to get different types of slides and visuals based on the asset you're looking for. I just think, it's been a really interesting exploration, because I know that this is something that AI historically has not really been the best at, I'll say, but seeing these new tools, I have noticed a huge difference in terms of the quality of the slides that these tools have been able to generate. So I just wanted to call that out today.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think not been the greatest is an understatement. Like, dude, they were brutally bad.
Yes.
But I do want to underscore and highlight, like, I think it's great you bring up, like, Tally, the using multiple tools. Like, that's I do think a lot of times people get locked into, like, well, I'm trying to use Copilot to do this, and just Copilot can't do this, or the recognizing of, like, well, Copilot can get you started, and then another tool could take you further, and another tool could take you further. Again, keep it in mind, is it worth all that effort? And the answer might be yes, it totally is worth all that effort, depending on what you're doing and who's trying to do it. But just recognizing, like, there are specialist tools, just like there's specialist people, so know what your tools are good at.
Definitely. Brent, any AI use cases that you're messing around with these days?
Yeah, I've been using it lately for, like, thought partner type of thing. Like, as internally for the company, we're defining services and defining products, and I use it a lot. From kind of Tim's example, I mean, I don't have 80 agents sending off, but I am thinking as an agent, like, hey, I have this product offering. Like, if I gave it to a chief product officer, what is the feedback that they would give me on that? And it's a good litmus test to be able to get understanding at that layer. And I'm like, oh, I didn't think about that, or and I sometimes I'm even just bluntly, I'm like, give me a grade on this. If you were a chief product officer reading this, and it'll give me, like, hey, this is a B-, and then I cry, and I'm like, a B-? Like, I thought I had an A. And it'll go through very tactically of, like, it'll say, like, here's things that could make it an A or an A+ type of thing that I should consider. And sometimes I take the considerations, and I'm like, sometimes based on the context, I don't agree with them. I'm like, I don't agree. I'm trucking forward. So
I love that. And I love in your example too, this is just a tip from the Minor Machines group of really asking the AI chatbot to be a certain role. So to act as, in this case, chief product officer. And so really coming at it from a certain area of expertise. I think that tends to work really well. So I like that call out of using a role for the tool to act as.
Yeah. Although, Brent, I do feel like your sadness at a B-, those are very different academic backgrounds. Because I would have been like, B-, sweet. Like, but that's just, I was never a good academic. So.
Yeah, it's been very interesting, just bluntly just having it grade you. And then it explains why it's graded you that way. And so that's been very intriguing to see it that way.
Very cool. Love it. Awesome. Well, I think this has been a great conversation today. So thank you for your time here and joining us, Brent. I'm really excited to hear what the audience has to say. So please, and Tim, correct me if I'm wrong or missing anything. Like, subscribe, comment, share,
do all the things, and all the channels.
Yeah, and let us know your thoughts. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for including me, and this was fun.
Absolutely.
Wish the podcast could go longer, but then people would probably fall asleep.
Yeah.
Right. Too boring.
Because it is the boring AI show.
Dun-dun-dun.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone, and we'll see you next week.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Boring AI Show. Practical AI minus the hype. Subscribe, share it with someone on their own AI journey, and we'll see you next time.